Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the November 2024 OpenAlex webinar. Really excited today to be talking about author profile curation. It's something that we have been working on for quite a while, and now we have some new updates we're excited to share with everyone. For those of you who haven't been to one of these before, the first component is presentation-based and will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel afterwards. Feel free to put your questions in the chat in the meantime, but when we get to the Q&A, I will stop the recording and you can unmute if you'd like, or just put questions in the chat. And then my colleague, Justin Barrett, who's joining me today for the Q&A, will hopefully be able to answer some of the more technical questions. He's sort of the brains behind our author disambiguation. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Quick presentation at a glance, talk a little bit about the author profiles in OpenAlex, how they're made and where things can go wrong, how users can curate their author profile, and I'm going to go through specific examples using some of the tickets we've recently received, and then some strategies that you might want to do when you're curating profiles, and then we'll have, again, that interactive Q&A. Oops. I've shown this slide in many of my webinars, and I like to go back to it all the time to say, really, in this scientific knowledge graph that we're creating, we're starting with publications, extracting information about those publications, and trying to link them to other components of the knowledge graph, like institutions, authors, funders. I've talked a lot about some of the other ones before, specifically institutions, but today I really want to focus on authors. So a high level of how they're made, but then we're also going to go into some of the specifics of how the disambiguation works, because it gives you an idea of where things can go wrong. If you haven't found an author profile in OpenAlex, this is sort of what it can look like. And I want to point out there's two different pieces to these author profiles. One is sort of these intrinsic properties of the author profile itself. And then the other are mapped fields. And these are really important for understanding how the author profiles are made, but also how to fix some of these problems. Intrinsic properties are things like our ID, display name, ORCID if we've linked it. So you can see this is my profile. My name is Kyle Demas, but you can see things like alternate names, institution, past institution, H-index, works count. There's a lot of information we have about author profiles, but much of this is mapped to the works that we have for that author. So for instance, the affiliations that we have here are not from my affiliations that I've registered somewhere, but instead the affiliations I've used when I've published. Same with topics. I don't go in there and manually curate which topics I've published on. Instead, when I publish on a topic that's linked to my profile, that becomes one of the topics that I publish on. So it is really important to understand those two differences, and I'm going to go into why in a moment. But first, the way that sort of we're doing this is very similar to affiliations, which I've talked about in the past. We take name text from these publications and then try and link it to known entities. So here's 4 examples of name variants of my name that I've published under: K. Demas, Kyle William Glenn, Kyle W. Demas, and Kyle Demas. And then our process of disambiguation tries to figure out all these different ways that those names can appear in the text of publications, and then relate them to a known entity that is the Kyle Demas author profile. And you can see here I've put both the display name that I use. I don't often use my middle name, but I used to when I was publishing. Long ago, a librarian told me always use your middle name because it'll be easier to disambiguate. And so I started using my middle name, but haven't used it in a very long time. But you can see the OpenAlex author ID, and this is generally what it will look like: openalex.org/authors/some number that starts with an A. That's my unique author ID in OpenAlex. And then also my ORCID, because we've been able to link my ORCID profile to my OpenAlex author ID. So this whole process is where sort of the rubber hits the road with our disambiguation. And I want to go through some of this. So the first question is, what triggers what we call AND, or author name disambiguation? Well, for starters, there's a new work. A new publication comes out. We're going to go through author disambiguation for those authors. But there's 2 other pieces that can trigger this that are important to know. The first is a name is changed on a previously processed record. So let's say a name gets changed in a Crossref record, and then we get the update from Crossref, or let's say somebody reaches out and says, hey, you grabbed the wrong text for the author name, this is what it should be. When we correct that author name, it goes back through the AND, or author name disambiguation. And another type of addition that can be really helpful is when an ORCID is added to an authorship. So let's say when I first published, there was an ORCID attached, but for some reason it got lost through the minting of the Crossref DOI and it gets added later on, then it can go back through that disambiguation process. A couple of things need to happen for our works before it can go through the name disambiguation process. And I want to talk about that because they become really important in that. And there's three here that are really important: affiliation matching, citation matching, and concept tagging. And what I mean by this is when we get a publication or changes to a publication, we go through it and we try and first understand what the affiliations are and match those to known institutions. And sort of that's what I'm showing here. You can see in the bottom right, we have School of Resource and Environmental Management, and then the institution we matched that to. Over on the left, you can see the references. So we went through all the citations of that work and tried to figure out which of those are OpenAlex works. And then up on the top right, you can see we've gone through and done the same with concepts. What are the concepts that this paper is about? What are the references that they're citing? What are the institutions involved? And the reason we have to do this before A and D is because each of these is going to help give us more insight when we're disambiguating names. So for instance, Kyle Demas and Kyle W. Demas, slightly different last names, but they publish from the same institutions, cite a lot of the same papers, and work on the same concepts. It helps us understand that that is probably the same Kyle Demas. This next slide has quite a bit of text on it, but I wanted to make this available to everyone and quickly walk through it, because this is actually what happens after that, after those pieces have happened and we go through the actual author name disambiguation. So first and foremost, we check to see if there's an ORCID, and then if there is, we try and match it to an existing author ID for that ORCID. It's great when that happens. Let's say there's an ORCID ID attached to the Crossref record for a work, and the ORCID ID, when we pull it, has a very similar name to what was included. That's great. We can feel very confident in that match, and so we'll include that. It's not always there, though. I think we're all looking forward to a future when ORCIDs are used universally and there's some authentication. So we have to do quite a bit of additional steps, 8 or so after that, when they don't match. And so if there isn't a match, we proceed. We weren't able to match an author ID to an ORCID. So first, there's some slight pre-processing of author name because it can come in different formats. Maybe there's some encoding issues for the way the data came through. But so that is something that happens. It's not very dramatic, but is good to know about. We then check to see if that exact name has appeared before. Has Kyle W. Demas appeared exactly like that before? And if it has, we run the disambiguation model against all of the instances where it's exactly like that. And if the model comes up with a score that is above a certain threshold that we've decided from some testing, we then will join this new publication or this new authorship to that existing author ID where that exact name has been used. If not, then the name is blocked based on the first initial and last name, because maybe there's just slight differences in, or a typo in Kyle. But if you block by first initial and last name and then run it back through that model, if we're able to join it again, the score is above that threshold, we'll join it to that existing author ID. And then finally, and this is a really important one to know, if we can't make a match, this is what triggers a new authorship or a new author ID to be created. When this happens, and it shouldn't have happened, for instance, I'm going to show an example later on, but when a new publication can't be matched to Kyle Demas and a new profile is created, I call those splinter profiles because those aren't really meant to be a new individual person, but we weren't able to match it effectively. So you might hear me use that term. The model itself takes these 6 things into account. So I did want to put these out here so we can have a conversation about that later and how it affects the accuracy of the model. Institutions is really important. There was a time when academics almost never changed institutions. Now those practices are changing quite a bit, but it can still be really helpful. People don't typically go to one institution and publish one time. They often are publishing multiple. Of course, that's not the case with graduate students who might go and just publish their thesis, but generally across the database, that can be really helpful. And then co-author names. A lot of people, once they've established a collaboration with someone, tend to collaborate with that person over and over again. Not always, but it does help us feel confident in matching to an individual author if they keep collaborating with the same co-authors. Citations is really important. Even when somebody changes institutions and starts collaborating with new people, they often are referencing a lot of the same works because those works are foundational to their lines of inquiry. So that can be really helpful. Now, we use the Microsoft Academic Graph concepts. You'll probably notice that we've stopped using those across the database and we've been sunsetting those, but they are still currently being used in author name disambiguation. That is likely to change in the future, but it's worth knowing. If a publication comes out and it's on the same concept as a slightly different name variant of Kyle Demas, then it's likely to be able to match. And then two more worth saying, the name length and the number of spaces in name. We can talk more about those if you have specific questions, but number of spaces in name tends to be a proxy for how many different names they have. So some person might always publish with 4 names, 2 middle names, 1 first name, 1 last name. They end up having 3 spaces in their name, something to that effect. Okay, so that's how it's currently working. There are a few things we're looking at now to try and help enhance this in the future. And I did just want to give you a quick insight on where we were probably going with that. Some of the ones we think will be really helpful is changing from just using concepts to using topics. Topics are a lot more precise and a lot more specific generally. So we think that will improve the accuracy as well. One author tends to have much fewer topics that they publish on than they do concepts, for instance. But even going a step further on that would be to use average paper embedding. This is something you're going to see OpenAlex moving into in 2025, but that's using a better proxy for similarity among papers. So we have topics, which are really great. We have keywords, we've got fields, we've got all these other ways of looking at what things are about. But a new one would be using AI embeddings to see how similar 2 papers are. And that can be much more accurate. Obviously, it doesn't help if the person publishes on all sorts of things, and I am one of those people, but it can be really helpful. And then 2 more improvements we've got on our radar. One is to allow common names to score differently than rare names. And the idea here is that there are some rare names like Kyle Demas. I'm the only one in the world. No matter what variation I put on that, it should be able to match that. Whereas John Smith, it should have a little bit more hesitancy, it being the model, to match those. And then the last one I mentioned, we're using co-author names, which is great. It was a good first start, but also using co-author ORCIDs, which is, we believe, will be much more accurate. So that's how our author disambiguation works currently. I want to talk a little bit about where things go wrong, and then I'll go directly into some of the common errors that we see. And I'm actually going to submit some curation requests for each of them so that you can see how that works. Okay. So there's lots of ways that this can go wrong, but common issues that we see in author name disambiguation, if you keep wondering why A and D and is capitalized, that's what we mean there. A really important one is that upstream metadata is either missing, or it's limited, or it's wrong. So for instance, the wrong ORCID gets associated with an author during the exchange between Crossref and the journal. That could be one example. Or there's no affiliation data submitted with the Crossref record. This is something we see a lot. When it's missing data, it often leads to unable to make matches. And sometimes that's what creates a splinter profile. Incorrect matches often come from wrong metadata. But there's lots of other ways that these things can happen. But as an example here on the right, I showed you, I pulled up my author profile, which I've done some cleaning on. I can share the link to the YouTube video where I first did a tutorial of all this. I went and cleaned up my profile in its entirety. But this is one of the works, you can see introducing the Leiden ranking open edition, that created a splinter profile for me. You can sort of see in the gray, my works before 2024 were really about kelp forest evolution and biomechanics. And then I went a couple years without publishing as I changed careers. And then my next publication was on the open rankings at a new institution, but there actually wasn't even any institution metadata in this. You can see the institutions included are Leiden and Curtin because the record didn't have my institutional affiliation. So the algorithm said, I don't feel confident calling this the same Kyle W. Demas. This is something that's totally different. There's no affiliation data to match. There's not even any citation data to match. So it created a new profile. Another common thing we see is with common names or the same name working on different topics, the same name working on the same topics or at the same institution, or sometimes both. That's more rare, but we have seen a few cases where we have the same person, the same name, working on the same topic at the same institution, and that becomes really tricky to sort of disambiguate. And then inconsistency in author name text. So that leads to incorrect matches or unable to make matches when they should happen. But it also leads to confusion with preferred name, or we don't know what's the preferred name. And that's something we get a lot of requests for. So we've gone through all of the hundreds of curation requests we've gotten through our support ticket system, which is now another plug for that. Please send concerns you see in OpenAlex to the support ticket, because we do, even if we can't respond to all of them, go through, synthesize them, and use them to guide sort of our development. But we've used that to come up with a new form. It's a Google form right now that facilitates 4 different author profile curation requests that we get a lot. You can see it on the right. It's a very simple form. The 4 things that you can do are update the preferred name for your profile. So I said sometimes I use my middle initial and sometimes I don't. I went through this to remove my middle initial and just have Kyle Demas as my preferred name. That's pretty simple. The next one is to merge these author profiles. So when these splinter profiles occur, like that one I had with the bibliometric work, I was able to merge those. That's a common request we get. And then the next 2 are about the publications linked on your profile. The first one is, hey, this publication is on my profile, but it is not mine. This was an incorrect match, and you can remove that. The second one, or the last one, I guess, rather, is, hey, you should have had this publication under my profile, but you didn't. Please add it. These last 2 are really important because they also help with a lot of the linked metadata. So if, for instance, one of the works that we added to your author profile that shouldn't have been there had a wrong affiliation, that's where that wrong affiliation in your author profile is coming from. So this is the form. There's a link here. I'm going to show how to use it in a moment. But I did want to quickly say what to expect after you submit that form, because I think that's really important. Once we receive this request, these are carefully thought out to populate a table in our database that has sort of what you're asking it to change. And as soon as you submit that, it populates that table automatically, but it goes to status pending. Then we have somebody on our end who manually curates that. And you're going to see a lot of this in the next couple of years as we grow to do community curation on all of OpenAlex. But someone's going to curate that. And if they can find evidence that this is something that should be accepted, they'll accept it. Basically, they click a button or they hit yes to accept. And then every day, a script runs to take all of the new yeses and ingest them into OpenAlex. So as much of this as possible is automated, but we do have a step to make sure that there is some layer of quality assurance. It typically takes about 3 weeks from form to fix, as I like to say. But just as a reminder, we're a small team of 6 people. So if somebody goes on vacation, that actually can have a pretty significant impact for 1 week. So maybe it's a month at some point, but that's typically the process you should expect. Now, in the future, I'm really excited about this. Next year, we're going to be integrating a lot of these pipelines that we've created for curation directly into the author profiles online so that you can do all of this without going to a form. But the form is there now and it works great. And there will be other ways of submitting it as well. For instance, for some institutions we work with, an inbound API. But all of that's in the future, and this is sort of what's available now. Okay, so that's generally how things work and what you can expect. I want to go now into some specific curation examples. Okay, a common one we get, can you fix the spelling of my name, or can you change the preferred name? And this is a great example. So this person wrote to us saying, hey, there isn't an accent in my last name. Can you change that? You can see here down at the bottom, we have the author ID. Okay, so I'm just going to go in. I thought I put the link here, but it's not going to let me do that in presenter mode. That was silly of me. Okay, so if you haven't done the author search in OpenAlex before, I'm just going to show you now. Typically, when you're in here, you can start searching for a name, and you can find that author tag there, or you can go to openalex.org/authors and go to our author search. So here I'm going to type in, that name was Jose Enrique Ruiz. And you can see it's bringing up these different author profiles. Okay, so you can find the right one that you're looking for. I actually, because I have the author ID, I'm just going to type that in. Authors A. Sorry about that. I thought the links would work. 502, 501. 502, 501, 4316. 4316. Okay, this is the one that I was looking for. So you can see here, when I look under alternate names, we have sometimes where it's happening where there is the I and sometimes an accent on the I and sometimes where there isn't. But what this person's telling us is they want that removed. So here's where you're going to use the form to do that. If you can't find the form in the future, because it is a Google form link, I want to remind everyone that help.openalex.org is meant to be our new knowledge base where you can find anything you're looking for. So if you go here and you type, I don't know, errors, author curation, you can see how can I fix errors in an author profile is one of the things that comes up. And there's a link to the form here. So for this form, it does ask for your email. Oh, it's got me signed in. I think I need to sign out to be able to do this. Sorry about that. Help.openalex.org. Okay. Errors, author. Okay, now I can use this Google form. Because I'm an administrator of the form, I saw something different. Okay, so here I'm just going to use my Kyle@ourresearch.org. This is not my profile. You can say that it's your profile, and that does give us a little bit more information when we're curating to know our ability to accept that. And I'm just going to copy and paste that, that author name. They want to change the display name. So depending upon which one you pick here, you're going to get a different pop-up. So here it says, enter the name as it should be entered. So here I'm just going to copy and paste because the only thing that we were told to change was the I. And then I'm going to hit submit. And then it's submitted that process and it's gone through our pipeline. Next, I'm going to hit the submit another response just to have this open for the next ones, but I'll go through some of those now. So I have multiple author IDs. Can you merge them? So this is a great example of those splinters that I talked about. This person sent me a link, and you can see I included that at the bottom to how you can find all of these profiles. So they just went to that author search and typed their name. And then they went through and confirmed that these three are actually splinter profiles of this main one. And so they wanted to have them merged. So for that, you go to the author profile. I'm just going to put my name again, not my profile. So here I'm going to take this author profile, that's the first one. And then I'm going to say merge another profile into mine. And here the instructions to you are add that author ID or add multiple separated by a comma. So I'm going to go through here. I'm going to go back to that situation. I'm actually going to open a separate tab for each of these. I'm going to copy, paste. Let me just move my screen a bit. Okay. And then I'm going to get that last one as well. Okay, all those are in there, and I'm just going to hit submit like that. So this is another curation request that's already populated in our table, and it's just waiting for someone to go through and sort of verify that. Close some of these. Okay, another common one we get, my work is tagged to someone else, and this can be interpreted two ways. It's wrong on that other person's profile, and it's missing from mine. And you can use either of these pathways on the form to be able to get this correct. So if I go in here, actually, I think it's going to be easier if I, sorry about that. I'm just going to, oh, I'm not going to be able to do that because I'm signed in. Okay, sorry, bear with me just a moment. I need to be able to click these links to be able to do this right. And I think I can do that if I don't share the full. Okay, so in the example here, they gave us the correct author that it should be associated with, and obviously we could get the incorrect one that's associated with. And they gave us the work ID. So I looked up that work ID in the API just to see, okay, what went wrong here? And this is over on the right, the response to that API call. And if you're used to looking at affiliation data, we have the same sort of thing where you can look at the raw name that was included on the publication and what we matched it to. And you can see here, the display name was Jane Sappington, but if you look down at the raw author name, it's J. Mark Sappington. So for this specific example, there's two different ways that you can fix it. I'm going to use the correct author. I'm going to put my name again, not my profile. And then I'm going to add a work to my profile. And then it just needs that work ID number. And hit submit. Now, if you had said that it was the wrong work on somebody else's profile, it's going to remove it from them and run it back through author name disambiguation. So it might have gone to the right profile anyways, but at least in this way, we're sure that it's going to the right one, and it will remove the wrong one. Now, the next examples I wanted to show, I wanted to talk a little bit about a common question we get that we have not made simple yet, and there's a reason why. So this was just on social media. Somebody sent this to me. Really great that you have this form essentially, but there's no way for me to remove my incorrect affiliations. And I mentioned earlier that we don't actually get your affiliations from anywhere other than your publications. So there's something that went wrong in the publication that we matched. So these are a little bit more complicated to fix, which is why there isn't an easy way. We don't want people to be able to just remove their affiliations. So we could have mapped the wrong work to your profile. So maybe it was an author at another institution, and as soon as we remove that work, that institution is going to drop from your profile. But it's also possible that the work is yours, and either we grabbed the wrong affiliation text or we got the right affiliation text, but we matched it to the wrong institution. And this was actually an example of the latter. I went and looked into it, and the work that is on here actually is this person's publication. So we don't want to remove it from their profile. But what happened is the source, in this case was Microsoft Academic Graph, took the wrong text. It was published by Indiana University, and it thought that was the affiliation of the author. So that's something that you can't fix in this form. When you see something like this, send it to us. Because I use this as an example, we are going to go ahead and fix this on our end. But I did want to share that. And just to show you, because we get this quite a bit, a couple more examples. I want to go through some tangible examples. So the first one, can you remove my incorrect previous affiliations? So this person said there's wrong affiliations associated with this, this author profile. And one of them was Stanford. And so the way that we looked at that, we wanted to confirm, are these actually not that person's publications? So when I go to that link, that is basically just started with that author profile and then clicked all of the publications that have Stanford, we confirmed these publications did not actually belong to that person. So now we can use that form, and for these 5 works, remove them from the author profile using the form, and it's going to remove Stanford University from this person's author profile. I won't show that yet because I want to have some time for the Q&A, but we can do that as well. But it's that same idea. We now have a work ID for each of these. And if you're not sure where to get the work ID, if you click on one of them, it pops up. Oh, I've got things blocking it, but it pops up at the bottom of the URL. You can see there's the Zoom work equals this. So I would just remove that. Okay, another example, the one I just mentioned, the challenge here was actually that we had the wrong affiliation text that was grabbed from Microsoft Academic Graph. So we need to go in, there's nothing this author could have done to fix this. We need to go in and remove that to fix that, that upstream metadata issue. And then the final one, where my work has the wrong affiliation, this is an example from my profile. You can see Kyle Demas, and we've got Victoria Heart Institution Foundation as one of my past institutions. Well, I've never worked there. So the first thing I did is that same thing. I'm going to go to my author profile and limit it to just that work. And I know this publication very well. This is one that my undergrad published, and it's a great publication, but none of us had this affiliation of Victoria Heart Institute. So what I did was look into what was happening here in the API. You don't have to do this, but if you're just curious what I'm doing here, searching Victoria. And actually, the problem was not that we got the text wrong. The text is right, Hackeye Institute, which used to be in Victoria, but we matched it to the wrong institution. So when that happens, it's not actually an author issue, it's an affiliation issue. So I went and fixed it in the works magnet, which if you're interested, I can share that with you as well, but that's how we curate affiliations. And that should be live in my profile within a couple of weeks. So that's how you can handle those general use cases. If you're doing this for the first time, I have a couple of slides to talk about strategies you can go to find the works to remove and works to add that I think can be really helpful. So I'll go through those now. If you're trying to find works that need to be removed, the best way is to start with an author profile. So here's an example from someone who recently said, hey, most of these works are wrong, but if you look in this year of publication, they started publishing in 2005. So everything before that is not theirs, but everything else looked accurate. So you can see we've got the link here that just has their authorship ID and the publication year. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. And so now these 7 works are all the works that we can put through that form to remove, and it's going to remove a lot of that. You can see here, if I get rid of that year range, you can see a much broader publication history. If you're not sure how to do that, you can always at any time go to plus and look for more filters to add. So year, it was everything before 2015 or everything until 2015. And now it's limited to that. Or I think it was 2005. But anyways, that's how you would do that. And this same logic applies to when you find an erroneous institution. And I showed that with Stanford, for instance. But if you're on this person's profile and they've never worked for Delphi, you can click that to add that and say, oh, this is a good example. This is one that should be removed from that person's profile because they didn't work there. But now you have that work number that you can submit through the form. And then the last example is how do you find missing works? There's a few different ways. I did show if you go to openalex.org from anywhere, you can add /authors, or you can just from the drop down go to authors. And you can search, for instance, I think all of my Splinter profiles are cleaned up now, but if I search Kyle Demas, it would have brought all of the author profiles that had Kyle Demas in it, and you can find those author profiles. If there aren't separate author profiles and you want to find the works, another thing you can do is sort of the same logic with affiliation curation, but we have a field called raw author name search. So you can start with that, I'll show you, and then omit all the publications that have been matched. And this is actually what I did when I was cleaning up my profile. So if you see in the URL, it's kind of small, but the first thing I have up here is authorship ID is not my authorship ID, and then raw author name search is Kyle Demas. So there's 0 here, but you could do this with yours as well. If people are interested, this is something we can add to the user interface. Right now, the people who are doing this type of curation work are mostly using the API anyway, but let us know if that's something you'd like to see in the user interface, the ability to search raw author names, and we can get that added. Last page here, last slide, and I will make these slide decks of the slide deck available on the website as well, are the additional resources. So how-to and curation forms. Remember, everything is help.openalex.org. You can search things in there. If you can't find something that you're looking for, let us know. We're going to add a button there that says can't find what you're looking for. We'll create one. But when you submit a support ticket, if it's something of broad interest, when I respond to it, I try and make a help desk ticket so anyone can find that as well. So we really want to make those publicly available to everyone. There is a tutorial video on our YouTube channel specifically on how to use this author curation form. So feel free to go to that later. It's much quicker than this webinar and is more practical on submitting things. You can also at any time come to our open houses or our office hours. These are once a week, 1 hour a week, where someone is available to answer questions, troubleshoot. We can help you with thorny author profile disambiguation. And then finally, if none of these work, you can at any time send an email to support@openalex.org. That's what goes to our ticket system, and that's what we use to help guide our development as well. So really make sure that you're not afraid to reach out to that. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording now and we'll go to Q&A. I see there have been some questions in the chat already, so it should be really great. But for those of you who are just watching this online afterwards, thanks. I hope this was helpful, and looking forward to more in the future.